General Hospital will reveal Brennan had planned every detail meticulously, ensuring that when the moment came, there would be no mistakes. He had spent months orchestrating every possible scenario, watching, waiting for the right time to strike. But just before he could make his move, an even more dangerous agreement was sealed in the shadows, one that could alter the course of everything. Valentin, a man whose past was littered with treacherous alliances and deadly secrets, found himself cornered. Once a powerful figure in his own right, he was now nothing more than a fugitive, a man running from the consequences of his own dark actions. His enemies were closing in from all sides, and he had nowhere left to turn. Brennan had been waiting for this moment. With cold precision, he tightened the noose around Valentin's fate, forcing him into a position where there was no escape. Trapped with no viable options, Valentin's desperation became palpable. He was a man accustomed to control, to being the one making the decisions, but now he was reduced to pleading for his own survival. His breath came in uneven gasps as he faced Brennan, whose expression remained eerily calm, his sharp gaze cutting through Valentin's defenses like a blade. There was no mercy in Brennan's eyes, only the promise of something far more sinister. A cruel smirk tugged at the corners of Brennan's lips as he leaned forward, his voice a low whisper dripping with venom. "There is a way out for you," he murmured, his fingers tracing the edge of his glass as if the conversation were of no great consequence to him. "Kill Sonny, and you walk away free. Fail, and you die here and now." The offer hung in the air like a death sentence. Valentin's heart pounded against his ribs as he struggled to maintain his composure. He had faced countless dangers before, had survived betrayals, wars, and enemies who wanted him buried 6 feet under. But this was different. There was no room for negotiation. Brennan was not a man who bluffed. His reputation for cruelty was well earned, and Valentin knew that refusing would mean an immediate and brutal execution. He was already living on borrowed time, and Brennan had no patience for those who hesitated. A slow dread seeped into Valentin's bones. If he accepted, he would be plunging himself into another lethal game, one where Sonny Corinthos was the target. Sonny was no easy man to kill. Taking him out would require precision, ruthlessness, and absolute commitment to the task. Valentin wasn't sure if he had any of those left in him. But if he refused, death would come swiftly, and there would be no one to mourn him. Brennan watched him closely, his patience running thin. "Tick-tock, Valentin," he murmured, his voice mocking. "Make your choice." For the first time in his life, Valentin felt utterly powerless. His entire existence had been built on manipulation, on staying one step ahead, but now he was backed into a corner with only 2 choices, murder or die. His fingers curled into fists at his sides, his mind racing through every possible escape route. But there was none. With a slow, reluctant nod, Valentin gave his answer. Brennan's smile widened, dark satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. He had won. The pieces were moving exactly as he had planned. With Sonny out of the way, Carly would be within his reach, and nothing, no one, would stand in his way again. Valentin, now a pawn in a game far bigger than he had anticipated, had just signed his own soul away. Carly lay motionless on the hospital bed, her pale skin nearly devoid of life, each shallow breath so fragile that even the faintest breeze could whisk her away. The deadly toxin had seeped into her body, consuming her from the inside, leaving her trapped between reality and unconsciousness. The room was eerily silent, save for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, a stark reminder of how precarious her condition had become. In the midst of her hazy state, she felt a familiar warmth enveloping her, a strong, reassuring grip clasping her hand as if refusing to let go. With great effort, she willed her heavy eyelids to part, and the first thing she saw was Sonny. He sat beside her, his dark eyes filled with an unbearable mix of pain and regret. Exhaustion was etched into his features, his normally controlled demeanor now shattered by the sheer terror of losing her. His thumb instinctively brushed against her cold fingers, a silent plea for her to come back to him. He didn't know what else to do but stay there, holding on to her, silently praying that she would open her eyes again, that she would return to him. In this moment, everything became undeniably clear: he had never stopped loving her. The years apart, the fleeting romances, all of it had been meaningless. Carly had always been the storm that raged in his heart, impossible to escape. Sonny knew he had made mistakes, far too many to count, but he couldn't let her slip away again. Not this time. Day after day, Sonny remained by her side, tending to her every need with unwavering patience. He wiped the sweat from her brow, whispered words of encouragement, and carefully pressed a spoonful of water to her parched lips. Even though she couldn't yet respond, he stayed. He was willing to wait, willing to atone for every mistake the only way he knew how, by being there, by protecting her. And when Carly finally began to regain her strength, there was no need for grand confessions or dramatic declarations. A single look between them said everything. In Sonny's eyes, Carly saw love, remorse, and an unspoken vow: he would never let her go again. Though words remained unspoken, their hearts had already found their way back to each other, no matter what had happened before. But their silent reunion did not go unnoticed. From a distance, Brennan watched, his jaw clenched, his fists tightening at the sight of Sonny by Carly's side. Rage burned within him like an uncontrollable fire. Carly was supposed to be his, no one had the right to take her away from him, least of all Sonny. He had waited, he had planned, and he had ensured that she would finally be his. And now, to see her gravitate back toward the man who had hurt her. It was unbearable. The fury inside him grew with each passing second, twisting his thoughts into something dark and merciless. If Sonny was the obstacle standing in his way, then Brennan knew what had to be done. He had never hesitated to eliminate those who stood in his path before, and he certainly wouldn't start now. Sonny had stolen what belonged to him, and Brennan would take it back, no matter what it cost. Meanwhile, Sonny remained completely unaware of the darkness closing in around him. His world had narrowed to a singular focus: Carly. Every thought, every action was consumed by his unwavering determination to help her recover. He had spent so many years letting his pride, his mistakes, and the chaos of his world push them apart, but now, as he sat by her side, watching over her fragile form, he believed he finally had a chance to make things right. He wasn't thinking about the enemies lurking in the shadows, nor the danger that might be creeping closer with every passing second. He was thinking about the moments they had lost, the regrets that haunted him, and the love that had never faded despite the countless battles they had fought against each other. For the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. Carly was here, alive, and even though she was still weak, she was fighting. And as long as she fought, he would fight too. But Sonny's focus on Carly blinded him to the larger picture, to the insidious forces working against him. He didn't notice the subtle shifts, the carefully orchestrated manipulations slowly pulling her away from him. He didn't see the invisible strings being woven around them, tightening ever so slightly with each passing day. He failed to recognize that his greatest battle wasn't just against fate or his own past mistakes, it was against an unseen enemy who had been methodically dismantling his world from the inside out. Carly, too, was unaware of how deeply she was being manipulated. She saw Sonny's devotion, felt the warmth of his presence, and for a fleeting moment, allowed herself to believe that they could truly find their way back to each other. She didn't sense the invisible hands at work, guiding her thoughts, shaping her emotions, subtly steering her away from Sonny without her even realizing it. Brennan had been meticulous in his strategy. He had studied Carly, learned her vulnerabilities, and exploited them with masterful precision. He knew how to plant seeds of doubt, how to make Sonny seem like a shadow of the past rather than a part of her future. He understood that he didn't need to rip them apart violently. He only needed to create enough distance, enough hesitation, enough carefully placed obstacles to make Carly drift further from Sonny on her own. And she was. She was recovering, but with each day that passed, an invisible wedge was being driven between them. Subtle whispers of doubt, unexpected moments of hesitation, none of it was coincidence. It was all by design, a carefully executed game that Brennan was playing with deadly precision. Sonny, believing he was finally reclaiming the love he had once lost, didn't see that he was actually losing her all over again. And Carly, trusting the world around her, had no idea that she was walking straight into the trap that had been set for her. As Sonny stepped out of the hospital into the cold embrace of the night, he had no idea that danger was lurking just beyond the veil of darkness. The city was quiet, the streets empty except for the faint hum of passing cars in the distance. The dim glow of streetlights cast long shadows along the pavement, but Sonny paid no mind to them. His thoughts were elsewhere, lost in the haze of worry and exhaustion. He had spent hours at Carly's bedside, watching over her, making sure she had everything she needed. She was still weak, but she was getting stronger. That was all that mattered to him now. But as he exhaled a slow breath, rubbing a hand over his tired face, he failed to notice the figure concealed in the darkness, watching his every move with unsettling precision. Valentin remained hidden, his heart pounding violently against his ribs, his pulse erratic as he tightened his grip around the cold metal of the gun in his hands. The weight of the weapon was suffocating, the trigger a cruel reminder that he stood on the edge of no return. For years, Valentin had been a survivor, a man who found ways to manipulate the board in his favor, who played the game well enough to always come out on top. But tonight, there was no strategy, no alternative path, no escape route. He was a puppet now, forced into a role he had no choice but to play. If he pulled the trigger, he would cross a line from which there was no coming back. If he hesitated, if he failed to act, he knew Brennan would see to it that he wouldn't live long enough to regret it. He took a shaky breath, positioning himself, aligning the sight with Sonny's figure. His hands trembled, not from the chill of the night but from the weight of the decision that lay before him. Sonny had no idea that death stood just a breath away, that fate was being rewritten in this very moment. Valentin could feel the sweat forming at his temple, his mind racing through the countless possibilities of what could happen next. What if he missed? What if he succeeded? What if, at the very last second, his conscience refused to let him go through with it? What Valentin didn't know was that he, too, was being watched. Not far from where he stood, hidden in the deep recesses of the shadows, Brennan observed the unfolding scene with an eerie sense of calm. He had orchestrated this moment with precision, weaving together every thread of manipulation until the trap was set perfectly. Valentin was nothing more than a pawn now, a tool to accomplish what Brennan wanted most, the removal of Sonny Corinthos. Brennan's sharp eyes followed Valentin's every move, his mind calculating every possible outcome. If Valentin succeeded, then his problem would be solved without him ever needing to lift a finger. If he failed, if he hesitated for even a fraction of a second, Brennan would not hesitate to end it himself. In his coat pocket, his fingers brushed against the cold steel of his own gun, a silent promise that he was prepared for any outcome. His patience was thin, his tolerance for weakness non-existent. He had given Valentin a simple task, kill Sonny, and in return, he would walk away with his life. But if he faltered, if he so much as flinched, then Brennan would do what needed to be done. He would put a bullet through Sonny's skull himself. And once that was done, Valentin would be next. The night stretched on, thick with tension. Valentin swallowed hard, adjusting his grip, his finger hovering just over the trigger. And Brennan. Brennan waited, ready to strike the moment hesitation became a fatal mistake. Carly remained in her hospital bed, oblivious to the silent war being waged beyond the sterile walls surrounding her. She had no idea that, at this very moment, Sonny's life hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of an irreversible fate. The machines beside her beeped steadily, a rhythmic reminder that she was still here, still fighting. But what she didn't know was that the man who had refused to leave her side, the man who had vowed to protect her, was walking straight into a storm, one that had been meticulously crafted to ensure his demise. Somewhere in the darkness of Port Charles, fate was being decided by a trembling hand and a loaded gun. Valentin stood in the shadows, his pulse erratic, his grip tightening and loosening on the cold steel of the weapon he had been forced to wield. One bullet. That was all it would take. One squeeze of the trigger, and Sonny Corinthos, powerful, untouchable Sonny, would crumble to the ground, his reign shattered, his love for Carly left unfulfilled. And yet, Valentin hesitated, a war raging within him. Was this truly the only way out? Was this the price of his survival? Unbeknownst to him, Brennan's calculating gaze followed his every move, his expression devoid of sympathy, his patience worn thin. There was no room for error, no allowance for weakness. Valentin was expendable, he always had been. If he succeeded, Brennan's path to Carly would be clear. If he failed, then he would join Sonny in the grave. Either way, the night would end in blood. But what neither man accounted for was the unpredictable force that was Carly Spencer. She was still weak, still recovering, but the fire within her had never been extinguished. Her instincts had been dulled by illness, but deep down, something wasn't right. She could feel it, a nagging, unshakable sense of unease that told her Sonny was in danger. Would she uncover the truth before it was too late? Or would she awaken only to find that the man she loved had been ripped away from her once and for all? In the darkness of Port Charles, a new battle was beginning, one far more dangerous than any that had come before. The pieces were set, the players in motion, but the outcome remained unknown. And when the dust finally settled, no one could predict who would emerge victorious, or who would be left standing at all.